Hey guys, it's Core Ross and welcome to 6 News. Today we're doing a dedicated video on Mousetrap, Ubisoft's brand new anti-cheat on console for mouse and keyboard adapters, and this has been in the works for multiple years. It's also already in the game and has been watching players for the last 2 seasons to see who has been cheating on console. And the punishments are set to go live in the middle of the Command & Force season. And today's video is sponsored by Square Enix, who are offering you the ability to go play Final Fantasy XIV for free all the way up to level 60, and you can play it as long as you want. There is no game time restrictions, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that you can actually play thousands of hours of content on this free offer. You can find a link in the description below to actually go play the game right now if you want, which includes adventuring through 2 award-winning games, including the DLC Heaven's Ward, which the fanbase was very happy was added into this free trial because it gives you a huge amount of content and also a bunch of new jobs. It takes the total jobs that your character can pick from to 14. So if you've ever been tempted to jump into the Final Fantasy universe, now is the time to do it, and you can find a link in the description below. So in this breakdown, we're going to be looking at everything we know about Mousetrap, its actual release date, and the response from the cheat makers as well, as they're going to attempt to, of course, circumvent it with software updates for their hardware. We'll also look at the history of mouse and keyboard and the anti-cheats that have been attempted before that the hardware makers have been able to circumvent very easily, and what might make this new anti-cheat different or potentially fall to the same problems. We'll also discuss the punishments that are in place for mouse and keyboard players and whether or not they will potentially get far worse as the system is improved over time. We'll also discuss the possibility of false positives, especially with disabled players who actually need different hardware to play on console. And then we'll conclude with pure speculation from myself with no technical background whatsoever. It'll be just pure speculation, just on a few subjects that we don't yet know any answers to, and we may never know. There's a good chance we'll never know how this system works in the background whatsoever, so that it'll be harder for cheat makers to then get around it. And before we jump in, a quick update. The new season went live, and Mousetrap went live with it for a couple of hours, and then it was switched off, presumably because it wasn't supposed to go live, but we actually seen Mousetrap in action, catching people in their very first games in the new season. And now back to the rest of the video. So let's begin with a little bit of history. So back in 2015, I started to play Rainbow Six Siege on my Xbox One. And at this point, mouse and keyboard adapters weren't even on the minds of console players because effectively they didn't really exist in their current state as of yet. However, a few years later, around about 2018, things started to shift where mouse and keyboard players were becoming a bit of an issue, but nowhere near the levels they are today. And Rainbow Six Siege wasn't the only game to have this problem. Fortnite had a massive issue with mouse and keyboard because of the building mechanics in that game. Going over to a keyboard can give you a huge advantage, along with improving your aim as well. So Epic, the makers of Fortnite and the Unreal Engine, who basically have unlimited money and technical expertise, jumped in to solve this problem and brought out an update for Fortnite that stopped players using these adapters on console. However, the hardware makers who make these little dongles that allow you to spoof a controller input with a keyboard and mouse, they were very quick to come out with an update, and this circumvented Epic's attempt to ban mouse and keyboard on console. And it shows how hard a solution to this cheating problem is, because the hardware that is used to cheat is in a state of flux because it can continually get software updates from the developers of the hardware, which can be used to then circumvent any detection method. What also didn't help here with Epic was that the detection method was really simple, because when you have a keyboard and you're using that to control your character, you've got the WASD keys, which means you can only move in a total of 8 directions, along with your keyboard buttons being either on or off, which means if you want to move forward and you press W, you're going at 100% speed, whereas on a controller you can gradually increase that or decrease it, and you've got a range of 360 degrees. So in theory, it'd be very easy to detect something anomalous here, and that's what Epic went with. However, there was a software update for the hardware that came out less than 2 weeks after Epic's attempt, and it just added in some simple variety using real life inputs from a controller as a mask to mask your movements. So instead of having those 8 directions and always going from 0 to 100 with a button press, it would actually do it in variety. So no two movements were actually the same, resulting in different variations in press pressure, because that would get added in on top of the actual keyboard's inputs. And then directional movement would go up and down in variety of speeds. So the player using the mouse and keyboard would still get an advantage, but when the systems looked at how that person was playing, it would not look like an obvious keyboard and mouse. And this way of masking inputs has been so successful that there has not been another attempt to ban mouse and keyboard on consoles since 2018. Now, I'll also throw out some of the other stuff people have suggested to fix this problem. So first of all, native mouse and keyboard on console so that they can get paired with, say, PC players. But the reality is people are not going to give up an advantage to go off and play someone who's now going to be better than them with native keyboard support and all the bonuses that come with the performance of a PC. Not to mention, if you want to play mouse and keyboard on Rainbow Six Siege, especially now with cross progression, you can put together a potato PC, because let me just point out, this is an 8-year-old game that was made for esports. It runs on the cheapest of hardware, and you can make a PC that will run this game really, really well for less than what you can buy an Xbox Series X or a PlayStation 5 for. Other more crazy solutions people have thrown out is to add aim assist on Rainbow Six Siege, which it currently does not have in multiplayer, forgetting the fact that a mouse and keyboard player, because it emulates a controller, would also get the aim assist on their mouse and keyboard, which would not be a good thing. So now that we've gone over how a previous anti-cheat was defeated, let's move on to the response of the cheat makers on Mousetrap. Because there's one thing I do not like about Ubisoft's strategy, and that is announcing Mousetrap was coming. And let me explain why. There is already a response to Ubisoft's announcement by one of the biggest makers of hardware spoofers for console. And they have said that they're already working on a update to the software for the hardware to help hide from this new detection method. And they also talk about how they managed to bypass Fortnite's detection method in the same post. And if I was working strategy at Ubisoft, I would have said, let's not announce it. Like, I know it's a great feature. It's good to show off at the new season reveal. It's good to show off during the roadmap reveal. It's a very nice feature to get a lot of PR with and a lot of marketing with. But if you hadn't said it was coming and you just dropped it with a 0.2 patch without anyone knowing and without the hardware makers knowing, then it would have been very impactful on the players who were, of course, cheating. And they now have a month of warning that Mousetrap's coming. As a result, there is going to be a preemptive patch out for the hardware that may be able to help avoid Mousetrap's detection methods, which is not great. However, I may be dumb here. It's very possible that this actual strategy is the better way to go, because Mousetrap is already working in the background right now, watching players, and for the most part, they know who are the cheaters. That also means they know who is using the hardware. And when this patch comes out for the hardware, they will be able to see those same players suddenly switch over to having slightly different inputs from previously, and that might allow Ubisoft to actually iterate Mousetrap again before it's even released, potentially helping to figure out how the response is going to be before it comes out. But still, I would have loved if no one knew it was coming and it just suddenly got dropped with 0.2, and everyone they'd been watching for the last couple of seasons had their ranks rewards taken away and their rank progression dropped mid-season. So they went from maybe, being champion in the middle of the season way back to copper. And that would have been beautiful to watch. But we'll see if Ubisoft announcing it early is a good thing or a bad thing when, of course, Mousetrap comes out. Now let's move on to what Ubisoft has said about this new system. And what we're going to hear here is stuff that makes me more confident and less confident at the same time. So first we'll begin with the creative director of Rainbow Six Siege.
I know we said it couldn't be done, and yet we've done it. The team has worked so hard on making sure that console players have a fair and balanced opportunity while playing our game. And this is not only a Siege first, this is an industry first for us.
So very confident words there from the creative director, but also a little bit too into the arrogant side, because listening to his words don't make me confident about the system. The reason is when he actually starts that, he says that we've done something that couldn't be done. The only problem is the system isn't out yet. We don't know if it actually will work or if it'll be circumvented. So his words are great. He's trying to be very confident. He's trying to be very positive, but I don't get a positive feeling from his words. However, we also heard from gameplay programming team lead Jan Stalaka, who I actually loved listening to. He sounded like a proud father on the system, and I want to go over what he said because this to me was pretty excellent.
So on Siege, we have a problem where a lot of players are using these little widgets called input spoofing devices, and they allow you to play with a keyboard and mouse on console. Now, along with toxicity and cheating, this is one of the biggest complaints that we get from our community. And we heard you, we agree. It feels really unfair to play against other players when you have such a disadvantage. So this is a problem that all console shooters have, especially the competitive ones. And there hasn't really been a reliable solution for this yet. In fact, the devices they're using are specifically designed to be undetectable. We wanted to build our own system that would sniff out mouse and keyboard players on console so that we could build a better picture of exactly who is using these devices. And we called that system Mousetrap. We have been really quiet about it, but actually it's been running in the background in shadow mode for several seasons. We've been gathering data and analyzing the results, and now we have a much better picture. We know exactly which players are spoofing, when they were spoofing. We also know that at the highest ranks, spoofers become much more common, where they have the biggest advantage and the most to gain. It would have been really easy for us just to ban all those players, but we want to try something a little different. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and remove the advantage that they get from using one of these input spoofing devices. Starting in Season 8, Year 1.2, when we detect you spoofing, we're going to start adding extra latency to your inputs. It's going to start out really unnoticeable, but it's going to ramp up over several matches, and it will definitely be noticeable. Controller players will find that their disadvantage against mouse and keyboard players will be much reduced. To remove the penalty, simply unplug your spoofing adapter and continue playing on controller. After a few matches, the latency will be reduced and you'll be back to normal. We've worked really closely with our accessibility group here at Ubisoft to make sure that we take the needs of disabled players into account. We have designed the feature so that disabled players who use adaptive technology to access the game should not be affected by this penalty. However, if you're a disabled player and you feel like you've been unfairly penalized, there will be a QR code in the game that you can use to contact us. We will then investigate, and maybe we can use your feedback to improve our system. So additionally, we will be updating our code of conduct for all players to say that using external devices to gain an advantage is not permitted. I want to mention that this is an experimental solution. Nobody in the industry has solved this problem yet. We are trying something new, but it's not the final iteration. We intend to keep monitoring the data, to update our detection system, and to continue to tune the penalties. It's an evolving situation. We are committed to continuing to work on it to improve the fairness of Siege. Mousetrap will be coming Year 8, Season 1.2.
So after hearing Jan speak, my hope levels have definitely increased. Now, we're going to talk about the punishments that the mouse keyboard players will be getting shortly, but I just wanted to bring up this little bit, just going to clip this little bit out from what he said, and I think this kind of is something that we should really listen to.
I want to mention that this is an experimental solution. Nobody in the industry has solved this problem yet. We are trying something new, but it's not the final iteration.
And I think that's a very good reality check, because when the system does come out, there is going to be pushback, there is going to be the attempts to circumvent it, and we don't know how good it's going to be. So it's very possible that when it first comes out, it'll work really good, then there'll be a software update for the adapters and it'll work really bad, and then maybe as Ubisoft iterates, they'll be better. But how quick can each side iterate? Is the cheater side going to have more updates quicker, or is Ubisoft's system going to be able to learn and adapt? Is it AI based? Is it, machine learning? Or is it just some dude working on an algorithm somewhere? Not to mention, this is also Rainbow Six Siege, one of the buggiest games in the world, and this is Ubisoft, who are having a lot of issues when it comes to management. And one of the kind of examples I want to give is the QB update, which is an anti-cheat for Rainbow Six Siege that was brought in a couple of seasons ago, which is being praised as being absolutely kind of technically brilliant, and so far seems to be making cheat makers have to spend a lot more money to make cheats and invest more time and effort to get cheats made for Rainbow Six Siege, which is great. However, when the QB system was introduced for Rainbow Six Siege, it was broken, very buggy, to the point of where they had to deactivate it. And then a season later, they actually brought it back in, and since then, it seems to be working pretty well. And that's great on PC because if they do push an update that's broken and need to fix it, they can easily do that on PC without any issue. If this Mousetrap goes rogue and just starts giving everybody input delay, then it's a lot harder to switch that kind of stuff off, because patches and things need to be authorized by Sony and Microsoft for consoles, which usually takes about a week or so. So it could be, if this isn't something you can remotely switch off, or the remotely switched off part just doesn't work, you could have a big issue on console. So I am certainly worried about the technical issues, but there is a good thing, which is that on console you're limited to a certain selection of machines that play Siege, whereas on PC you have a huge amount of variety with different software running and stuff like that in the background that can change how things go. So hopefully they can make this update for console nice and stable and issue free. But this is Ubisoft we're talking about. Another thing he mentions is disabled players, and says that by default the system should not be penalizing disabled players. It should actually be able to identify between them. But they are going to have a fallback, which is a QR code in game that will allow you to contact them, and that means you can then say, hey, here's my setup, here's how I'm playing, and I'm being picked up as a mouse and keyboard cheater, and they will then be able to look at the system and potentially make some modifications so that your kind of way of playing is no longer getting picked up. Now let's dip our toes into the legal side of things, which again I have no expertise in, and we're going to talk about two things that people have been asking. First of all, the change in terms of service, which indicates that mouse and keyboard is cheating on console in Rainbow Six Siege. This is interesting and we'll jump into it in a second. There's also the second one, which is the response that I showed earlier in this video from the hardware makers that make the actual emulation dongles. They have obviously clearly indicated they are going to attempt to circumvent this anti-cheat. And people have been asking, does that mean Ubisoft can sue them? So first of all, we'll just jump into where the lawsuits are in relation to anti-cheats. And back in 2001, Ubisoft and Bungie teamed up to go after a bunch of cheat creators. And they have been successful in many lawsuits, with the last one being just a month ago. So what's the official response that we've seen from the hardware creators? Could Ubisoft actually sue them? My guess would be most likely not. First of all, terms of service are not any kind of legal binding document or anything like that. And the hardware makers are, more importantly, not actually signing the terms of service that, of course, a player has to go and play the game. What that does for Ubisoft making up that terms of service change is that if they ban players in the future, then there's no legal ramifications for other people come back and suing them for banning them, because they can say, hey, it's in our terms of service, it's right there, you're not supposed to do that, you did it, so you got banned. But it's not something they can use in a lawsuit to go after the makers. However, the post from the makers, there could potentially be some legal ramifications there. The only problem is, though, that this does not interact with the actual game's code in any way. Normal cheats, especially of course on PC, are actually injecting code into the game or attempting to play around with the code in order to get different results. And that's something you can definitely get in there and start suing for. So I'm really not sure there'll be legal ramifications for the hardware makers, but it's also possible that Ubisoft has just baited them into actually revealing that they are trying to circumvent it, and maybe that'll give them an edge up. There's also another thing I want to talk about, and that is that there's lots of cheats on console for different stuff. You can get strike packs and things like that that help you with recoil, and this anti-cheat seems to be aiming at the dongles for mouse and keyboard. It doesn't seem to be aiming at these other stuff that can be used on an actual controller to help with recoil. But presumably, if this is following patterns and it's, analyzing a lot of data, it's quite possible that something like a strike pack that probably has quite repeatable patterns might well be a future thing that this system can look for too. But I believe right now this is just limited to mouse and keyboard hardware dongles that are set up to spoof as a controller. So I definitely don't believe this system is going to suddenly just wipe out all cheats on consoles. There will still be, I presume, many cheats available for people to use. And it's an extremely lucrative business as well, remember. There's a lot of money being made here. Alright, now let's get on to punishment for the cheaters, because it seems to be equally light on punishment and heavy on punishment, because given a latency input delay to the player that is cheating is pretty genius, and it is a horrific thing to have latency, and everyone goes out of their way to get the most FPS, the lowest latency monitors or TVs, and the best possible responsiveness they can get, especially in a first-person competitive shooter like Rainbow Six Siege. So it is going to be hell to play Siege with its latency slowly increasing as you play more. But I am worried because the engineer does talk about how the latency is going to slowly increase and it'll be not even noticeable to begin with, and then it'll ramp up, and he says over the course of games, which is a worry because if it ends up being as simple as, say, this, you go and you plug your mouse and keyboard in, you play one game of ranked, after that game of ranked, you plug in your controller, play another game of ranked, and then go back to the mouse and keyboard, can you just play that and kind of manage the latency? Because that would suck if that ends up being the easiest way around this and you don't even need a software update. Or can you even micromanage where you would do the preparation phase with a controller, and then when you're about to get into a firefight, you go over to the mouse and keyboard and then back to the controller when you're feeling more calm again. I do worry that there might be simple solutions like that might be quite micromanagery, but people are going to be very happy to do that just to get themselves an advantage in an online computer game. And then I do want to see the ill-gotten rewards disappear. I would love them. I'm hoping maybe when they make this system, more foolproof and they're more confident in it, because I'm assuming there's going to be false positive. I think that's why the punishments are kind of low right now, is that there will be some false positives and they want to make sure they're not, legit players are not getting hit with extremely punishing sanctions and things. But I'm hoping that taking away like previous rank rewards, especially when you have 2 seasons worth of data, it's quite possible that they could go back and just say, right guys, these people were cheating back in these 2 last seasons, we're going to take away all their rank rewards. That would be freaking awesome if they can do that in the future. And especially if they have the data, that means they can go back and check it later. It's not like they have to ban you now. They could go back and say, all right, we now have a perfect system to text, mouse, and keyboard. Let's go back through the data that we've been collecting for all these seasons and then just ban those players and take away their rank rewards, which would be very nice. But right now, the punishment sounds like torture, but I don't know if it kicks in quick enough, and I do want them to be much more punishing when it comes to those, charm rewards and stuff, because this is the thing. People are cheating so that they can get something like a charm reward at the end of the season, and they're putting all this effort in to cheat just so they can get that, charm, and I'd be quite happy to take that away from them. And that leads us into speculation now, and it's wild speculation because I have no technical knowledge whatsoever, so everything I'm going to be saying here is total bull. Don't take it as any kind of reality, but let's have a chat about how things I think will probably go. So first of all, I give the launch of Mousetrap a 70% chance of happening on time. I would not be surprised if it gets delayed by a patch or something like that, but I'm hoping we do see it with point 2. I think that we'll see quite a lot of iterations of software from the cheat makers, and I think they'll be quite quick at it within a week or 2. And I think the first week of Mousetrap being out is going to be heaven for console players. I think that will be the week where mouse and keyboard will just be kind of gone for a little bit. But then I expect in the second week for it to return with a software update. And then it's going to come down to how quickly Ubisoft can iterate. And especially, are they going to have to iterate every patch? Or is this a system maybe they can update in the background where it, say, routinely picks up a new database to work from so that there's always an updated version of Mousetrap that it can iterate very quickly? Is it AI? Is it machine learning? Is it something simpler? Because if it ends up being some sort of AI thing or machine learning thing, I could be a lot more confident with its ability to iterate really, really fast. But if it's being done by some developers in the office, it definitely could be more like weeks or months between every iteration. But certainly I've gone from saying this is a problem that can never be solved to now thinking, I think it has like a 10% chance of working, like long term, which is insane. And maybe a 70 to 80% chance of working in that first week. So I'm looking forward to even getting that first week. So yeah, my hope levels have definitely increased quite spectacularly. Even if it's from 0 to 10%, that's still quite a jump. But I'm definitely not going to be sitting here confidently saying this is going to solve the problem and it's all going to be fine, because I do think there is more than a big possibility of, like I say, not just software updates for the actual mouse and keyboard, but people just plugging in adapters for a game or even for a single round. Like imagine if you just need to win one round to win the game. That's when you plug in the mouse and keyboard and the delay doesn't kick in till later. That's going to be an easy way to get around this system. However, I do think that's probably version 1 of Mousetrap. I imagine as we get to version 2, 3, 4 and 5 that the kind of countermeasures, the punishments will kick in quicker. And then if it gets to the point of where it gets so confident that it can actually ban people or take away rank rewards or using rank 2.0 to actually just reset the entire rank progress off that player and give everybody else they played against the rank points back. Stuff like that could be sensational, but that, we're probably talking a year in the future once this kind of iterates a bunch of times to get to that point of where they're going to be that confident. And that's if the hardware makers are not able to combat it effectively. And we've seen they're pretty good. They went up against Epic and they won. And we know that they can take stuff like real controller data and use that as an overlay on top of what the actual player is inputting on their mouse and keyboard. And they could take that a step further for sure. And they've already said they're going to be releasing a patch before the new season comes out. And they can iterate a bunch more before the Mousetrap is actually introduced. So it's going to be a cat and mouse game. But Mousetrap might well be able to go up against mouse and keyboard and possibly win, but I still only give it like a 10% chance, but that's 10% more than I was previously given. So yeah, we'll see if Jan and his team here are able to do this and be successful. I'd also love to know your opinions in the comments below as well, because this is an open discussion, not just myself blabbering. But anyway guys, thank you very much for watching and I'll catch you next time.